Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of a vibrant and insightful 20-year-old son, Joey. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. Joey and I are committed to helping anyone impacted by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. I'm also a certified coach helping seekers who want to move their lives forward. Well, listeners, I always advocate for reading adoptee memoirs and birth parent memoirs too. I think it's one of the best ways to understand adoption's complexities. Today's guest, Susan Kiyo Ito, is a writing professor at Mills College in San Francisco, and her memoir, I Would Meet You Anywhere, was a 30-year project in the making. But like a fine wine, her writing was exquisite and brought me on a roller coaster ride right along with her. It brought me literally to tears several times, which is very unusual for me. Her book has achieved high honors in the literary world. It was a finalist for the 2024 William Saroyan International Prize for Writing in Nonfiction. It was a finalist for the 2023 National Book Critics Circle Award for Autobiography, and it won the Library Journal's Best Memoir for 2023. Not too shabby, really amazing. And because her writing is so damn good, Susan's memoir is reaching a wide audience well beyond the adoption community, helping others understand adoption's complexities better. So welcome to Unraveling Adoption, Susan. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Beth. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, and thank you very much for sharing the gift of your writing. Those 30 years were well spent. I'm sure for part of them, you're like, God, when is this book going to get finished? But I think it finished at exactly when it needed to be and is hitting the perfect note today. I hope that you feel the same way.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm particularly in tune with your story because my son was adopted from Japan. So we have the Japanese thing, and my ex-husband, his adoptive dad, is Japanese American. But my son is 100% Japanese. And you're half white and half Japanese, but raised by Japanese parents. So it's like, we're just like the inverse of each other. It's flipped around. And I just want to sit at your feet and learn. So I'm so grateful that you're here. Why don't we just start with you just sharing a little bit about your origin story so people can understand where you're coming from?
Sure. Well, to start out with, I was adopted at 3.5 months of age. I am biracial, half white, half Japanese. And my adoptive parents are second generation Japanese American. I'm third generation. And they had been waiting quite a long time. They were on a waiting list at an adoption agency for over 10 years before the agency contacted them and said, well, we have a half Japanese baby. And they jumped at the chance. And I think back then in the day, it was 1959, matching was very much of a thing. And I'm not really sure if it was a mutual decision of theirs, if they would have accepted a baby of another race, or if it just wasn't acceptable to give them a baby of another race. It's not clear. But they saw friends of theirs, people that they knew who were trying to adopt, who, were able to adopt within a year or two. And here they are going on over a decade. And I know that it was really rough for them. So they were very happy when I showed up.
I bet.
Yeah. So that was our experience, that they were very happy to have me. But I was always aware that I was adopted. I was always aware that I wasn't a complete match and that I did look different from them. And they were very matter of fact about it. They didn't try to pretend otherwise, but they also, I would say, raised me to be very connected to Japanese heritage and culture.
I love those parts of your book, the church you went to kind of far away, that was a Japanese church, and all the holidays and festivities and food, all of that is so impactful. And I thought that was all wonderful. And it sounded like your parents were just lovely, lovely people.
True that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the book talks about your upbringing for sure, but it kind of centers around, the title even talks about this desire to be around in the orbit of your birth mother, Yumi. How would you describe your birth mother to somebody who's never read your book?
I would describe her as very charismatic, very a social, charismatic, cheerful person, although very, very private at the same time. I think she had a deep ambivalence about me, knowing me, having a relationship with me from the very beginning. And I think it was a real challenge for her because it was such a deeply held secret for her.
Yes.
It was difficult. And yet at the same time, I think she really wanted a relationship.
Yes. And you could probably very likely identify this better than me, but I believe in the Japanese culture that kind of let's just not talk about it, let's just not air our dirty laundry, that kind of thing is very prominent in Japanese Asian culture, probably overall. But I wonder that was probably a huge influence on her.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do know she told me that her parents never knew about me.
Oh, wow.
Her siblings never knew, and pretty much nobody knew.
There's an organization here in LA, in Little Tokyo, that is doing a lot of great work around mental health and kind of reducing that stigma in the Japanese culture, which I know is, I know from just watching my ex-husband's family and just being around Japanese people it is not a small thing. It is a small thing. It's a cultural stigma that we have to reckon with, especially people like you that are kind of stuck in the middle and had no choice in it. And, your life is not a stigma, but I'm sure it felt like it was, right? Like you're an actual person. You're not something to be hidden or to be ashamed of. Absolutely not. But I'm sure that that's how it felt. And that must have been very painful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and your title of the book, would you like to talk about the title and the links that you would go to find and to meet your mother?
Yeah, the title actually comes from a little passage from the day that I met her. I was a college student, and I was just being silly in my head, kind of doing this little Dr. Seuss thing. I would meet you in a car. I would meet you in a jar. I would meet you anywhere. But it really did speak to just this incredible sense of urgency and intensity that I felt like whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, in whatever circumstances, I'm there. It's that important to me. It's really, really important to me. And that just kind of continued on through the length of our relationship, and that I would be willing to lie about who I was. I would be willing to do all kinds of things. But the thing that I love about the title, and I credit my writing group for helping me find it, because I had a number of really terrible titles before this, and that it really doesn't just mean her. It started out really related to her, but then it also extended to my birth father's family. It also extended to, I think, my adoptive parents, that I felt like I would meet them wherever and in whatever way, whatever way we could to connect.
Yeah.
My adoptive mother had dementia toward the end of her life, and I felt very, very close to her then, but felt the same way about her. Like I would meet her anywhere, in whatever state she was or in whatever way she was able to be with me. And then ultimately, I was like, oh, it's like I would meeting myself, being able to meet myself on this journey. And also for me, the importance of adoptee community, and that adoptee community is very, very important to me. And then ultimately my readers, I would make, I've been on a huge book tour for, 10 months,
Yes.
just meeting people for whom the book has resonated has also been really, really meaningful to me. It's the way that I also sign my books when I inscribe them at book events.
I loved I would meet you in Seattle. I would meet you in Chicago. That was
Exactly.
so great. That was so great.
Yeah. So it's really about making connection. And it starts out, very specifically about the day that I met my birth mother, but I think it really extends further than that, about making connections of all kinds.
Yes. And as you evolve throughout the book, I feel like you are less sacrificial of your own needs in the process. I mean, at the beginning, you literally would have dropped anything to go find Yumi, and she often would not reciprocate, right? It was just this kind of chasing energy. But I feel like as you grew, you set some more boundaries or took better care of yourself as you went through. Do you feel that as well?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. You know, at the beginning, I really literally would have done anything. And I think, you know, later on, felt like I needed to do what I needed to do for myself. Part of it was actually writing the book.
Yes.
You know, that was sort of the ultimate, I need to do this.
Yes, yes. And how has it been for you? Did it release something in you when you hit the publish button and we're done with the book and it was out in the world?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it did in a way that I really was not expecting. Like, I wasn't expecting it to have the emotional impact that it did. And what I often say is that, you know, I carried so much of this in my body and in my psyche. And I thought about it all the time. It was really kind of all consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Once I put it in the book, it lives in the book now. It lives in the pages. And I feel like I was able to put my burden down and let it live in the pages. And it doesn't stay with me in the way that it did before I wrote it.
Wow.
Before it was published.
That's beautiful. I know that writing can be so healing, and I've heard that from several adoptees that I've interviewed about their memoirs, how much of a process of healing that actual writing and publishing has been. That's really great. I pulled out a little quote from toward the end of your book that is so powerful. It says, "Still, I couldn't resist Yumi's siren call. I would crash on the rocks of her." And I mean, how many of us do that for whoever is our people that we would do practically anything for? And it's so fraught. There's actually this short film by an adoptee I know, Farrell Amadeus, and somebody kind of tricks her into saying, I found your birth mother and I will take you to her, and then proceeds to try to kill her. And it's this really kind of horror little mini film, but it is like, well, yeah, that's what we're willing to do for those people that call our name. You know, we're willing to just put ourselves in tricky situations, put ourselves at risk, you know, ignore red flags, and that bond with your birth mother, it's so strong. Are you able, well, you did in your book beautifully, but are you able in literal in time words explain how frustrating that was for you to be so drawn to this woman that was so ambivalent and so unable to give you what you needed most of the time?
Well, it was hard, you know, and I think it was also especially hard for people around me who care about me, who saw me keep going back for more and keep trying, or, you know, for a relationship that really couldn't be the way that I wanted. You know, I think it couldn't be because of each other. Like, I couldn't give her the relationship that she wanted and vice versa.
Yeah.
You know, because we just wanted really different things out of it.
Yeah.
And that was difficult. And it was difficult for people who care about me to see me getting hurt. And I think it was really challenging. It was hard.
Yeah.
And I think putting it in the book has allowed me to kind of step back and look at it from a slightly more, I'm never going to be totally objective, but being able to look at the whole thing from a slightly more objective viewpoint and see just how, I don't know, lopsided it was, or it was challenging, you know.
As you've toured around the country on your book tour, have other adoptees said, "Oh my gosh, I do the same thing," or "I've done the same thing"?
Oh yeah.
Have you had a lot of validation? I bet.
Okay. I mean, and that's been one of the best parts, I think, of putting the book out, is finding, you know, that I was able to validate experience of other adoptees, and they for me as well, where they were like, this really resonated. I really got this. I really understood. You really articulated my experience. And that's been one of the best parts.
Yes. I bet so many adoptees can be like, oh my gosh, yes. No matter, you know, what their racial situation is or details, but that drive to connect with your birth mother, I think, is probably universal. One thing I loved about your book was the many details, just little tiny sensory details that just put you in the place. Is that because you're an English teacher? I mean, I know that's what people teach to do, but it seemed also so organic. It wasn't just like, now here's your sense of sight and here's your sense of sound. It wasn't like formulaic in any way. It felt very natural and just pulled me in. How did you do that?
I have to say it's just the way I experience the world. Do you know what I mean? And I know that I've heard about musicians or dancers or visual artists, their brains work like somebody said, I always see in colors, always noticing the
Oh,
color
right.
shapes or things. And I don't do that. But when I'm walking around in the world, I'm narrating it in my head. And I'm
Okay.
kind of like describing the shape of the leaves outside the window, or
Okay.
it's just how my brain works.
You just live in words, descriptive words. Yeah.
I'm just living descriptive words
Yeah.
or narrating my life.
That's
Like,
beautiful.
what I mean, like she slumped against the steering wheel in her car and I don't know what.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know what it is, or just it's weirdly the way that my brain works. And so I just
Beautiful.
write it the way I think it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But how did you remember those details, especially as, during your first reunion or when you were younger? How do you remember?
Well, I actually happen to have right here. This is the journal
Oh
that I
my
was
God.
writing in when I met her.
Wow.
And I knew that a day like that, it would be so easy to just have an out of body experience and forget
Mm.
it instantly. Or for it to just, it's so surreal and it's very hard to hold on to it. So I forced myself to write down every detail as soon as I got back to,
Okay.
where I was staying, and just do not forget this. And it's interesting because I hadn't really looked at it a lot while I was writing. And then I went back and sort of did a reality check. And I'm like, oh, I've been using my imagination. It wasn't exactly like that.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so I
interesting.
had to like do a reality check on myself, a fact check on myself,
Yeah.
and see, no, I wrote this, on that day many decades ago, and I have to go with that, you
Yeah.
know.
It's interesting. Our brain does kind of make up stuff as it goes along. It just kind of transforms, but you have the actual documentation. That's pretty amazing. You're like a writer's writer. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And toward the end of the book, you talk about what life might have been like if instead of being adopted, maybe you were taken care of by your white side of your family, or maybe adopted by white people. I don't know. But I think there was a chance that somebody else could have taken care of you if they had known on your white side. And then you were like, whoa, what must have that have been like? You wouldn't have had all the Japanese culture that you grew up with. And whew, I mean, that's like a parallel universe kind of question. How could you ever know? But could you just expand on that just a bit?
Well, I mean, it came up, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, so close your ears.
Oh,
You don't
okay.
want to hear a spoiler, but I did meet people from the paternal side of my family eventually. And, they said, oh, if we'd only known, you could have lived with us. And, I saw where they lived and how they lived, and it was a completely different existence. There's like no Japanese people or other Asian people anywhere around.
Wow.
And it would have been a completely different life. I would have gained things that I didn't have and I don't have. And I would have lost things that are very, very dear to me. So
Yes.
it just kind of brings up the randomness, I think, of adoption that,
Yeah.
there's a child and then there are, all sorts of parents or, potential parents. And it's really random where that child ends up,
Yeah.
and it could be just, a flip of a file in some social worker's office. It could have been who happened to be available or home, who happened to know. And in my case, they didn't know. And if they had known, it would have been very, very different. So just knowing about these potential alternative lives, it's kind of mind blowing. You just don't know how it could have been different. And I know that this is something that comes up for many, many adoptees, that it could have been so different.
just one little twist of fate and they're poof, you're onto a different path. It's kind of incredible. I guess that is true for anyone. Every egg gets fertilized by a different sperm and you just never know what it's going to create. It's just like life is kind of crazy like that. But I think it's particularly poignant for adoptees, and that when you have different possibilities right in front of your eyes, especially after you are in reunion, you're like, whoa, this would have been much different. I wonder if you would be willing to read a very small part of your book about luck. Adoptees are often said, you're so lucky, or often told they're so lucky. And you wrote about it beautifully toward the first third of the book. This is after your adoptive parents met with your birth mother for the first time.
Right. So we had lunch together and the meal was just sort of wrapping up. And so here's my parents. So nice to meet you. So nice to meet you too. Then my father cleared his throat like he was going to make an announcement. Well, we really do need to thank you for turning this little girl over to us. We sure do love her. He coughed. My mother nodded, not saying anything. Bright tears sprang into my eyes. It was the first that anyone had mentioned anything about our odd triangle. Yumi said, "Oh no, I have to thank you for taking such good care. She has been very, very lucky." She turned to me and said it again. "You've been extremely lucky." Lucky. They all looked at me, their faces shiny with pride and maybe a little bit of envy at my tremendous luck. Luck was when your number gets called at the carnival and you get to walk home with a stuffed bear that is as tall as you. This didn't feel like luck.
I bet a bunch of adoptees underlined that part in your book. I'm going to guess. I also noticed something when you read that after your dad said, "We sure do love her," just the 2-word sentence, he coughed. And I can just imagine that kind of getting stuck in his throat. Like, oh, we don't usually talk about this kind of stuff. Is that why you think he coughed, or why you put that in there?
He coughed because he was getting emotional.
Yeah. Got to interrupt this a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he was getting emotional, and it was also like, that kind of throat clearing you make when you're like about a speech, like this is very important.
Yes,
I'm going to make a statement here.
Oh gosh, yeah, little details like that just put you in the place, and your writing is just so beautifully done. You absolutely give us all the details we need for the scene, and then you reflect on it, like that paragraph about being lucky. It's just so amazing. It's so great. What would you like us adoptive parents to know? If you could talk to all the adoptive parents in the world, what would you like them to know about adoption?
Well, one, that it's incredibly complicated. And I mean, I think I would really want pre-adoptive parents to know this. I wish that more pre-adoptive or prospective adoptive parents would read it just to know what might be ahead, on some level. And of course, I do not speak for or write for all adoptees because our experiences are so very varied and diverse and different. But I think, I didn't realize it at the time, but my parents were just so matter of fact. And so, you want to search for your birth mother? Of course. What took you so long? Of course. And they just were, they didn't push me to do it, but they didn't prevent, and they never, ever indicated if they felt any sense of threaten or hurt or anything like that. And I know that so many adoptees that I know feel like, well, I would never search until like my parents die, and in case your birth parents could have died. Well,
that's a danger.
Everyone could be dead at that point. And this huge sense of having to protect our adoptive parents. And, my parents I took for granted. I really took for granted that they never made me have that feeling. They were just like, "What do you need? Well, how can we help you? What's going on?" And they were just, they were just very matter of fact about it. And that is something that I appreciate so much. And they may have felt hurt or worried or whatever, but they never let on to me.
Yeah. They dealt with that over there on their own side.
They took care of it on their own side. And, they were happy to meet her. And They were just really great about that. And I think that's one thing that I would want adoptive parents to take away from it is that, I love my parents so much. They're like everything to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And me wanting to know about my birth family has nothing to do with them.
Yes.
Nothing to do with them. And it's not because I was happy, unhappy, lucky, unlucky, all the things, it was just like something that I really needed to know. And, sometimes I wonder if it was exacerbated by being biracial and having people ask me a lot, well, what are you? And I didn't know the answer. They didn't know the answer. And that I think that was a factor for sure. But I think supporting your child wherever they are. And I think that's all we can ask.
Yes, yes, yes. I hope adoptive parents are listening, and anyone, that has friends or family members that are adopted, all we can do is support them, what they need. And none of it is personal, and go deal with your own shit on your own side if you need to. It's fine. It's okay to have feelings, right?
Of course.
If adoptive parents have feelings, totally natural. Go deal with that in your own therapy, coaching, or whatever, and don't hand that to your kid to deal with on top of everything else, because there's enough that our adopted kids are already dealing with. Oh my gosh. I have one more very important question for you. Throughout the book, you write how Yumi called your name. And I want to hear how it sounds.
Susan.
Okay, lovely. Lovely.
It was kind of like, it was very kind of drawn out in this way. Susan? I don't know. It's kind of like that. And my parents said my name kind of in a more Japanese way, like Susan.
Oh, yeah. There's no, yeah.
And because that's how my grandparents called they said it in a more Japanese way, like Susan. It was just different.
Susan? Yeah. Well, thank you for solving that mystery for me. I was wondering that for the whole time. Very good. I guess I should have gotten your audiobook. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a wonderful audio narrator who did it.
Oh, it wasn't you
it wasn't. I had done the audio for a mini memoir, The Mouse Room, which is actually excerpted from here. And I did the audio for that. And it was so challenging. One is that I have a tendency to edit as I read. And it's very hard for me to read as it is on the page because I don't like that word. I'm going to change that word.
And your publisher's like, no, you can't change it.
Well, you have to read it word for word.
Yes.
I kept messing up on that level. And then it's also, it's just emotionally exhausting, to literally read the entire thing. It's, it's very vulnerable. It's very personal. And just, yeah, I mean, I can read a passage of a couple pages when I'm, at an event or something, but the thought of reading, over 200 pages was just, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you at all. I don't blame you.
And I actually haven't listened to the whole thing. I listened to the first part of it on Audible, but I wasn't going to listen to 6 hours.
You've already read it a few times.
So I have no idea how she actually says the name. It's funny.
Oh,
I don't really know.
That's hilarious. Well, hopefully she got it kind of close. That's really great. Now, your book, of course, is available on Amazon. Is there any other way to get a hold of you or the book? How would you like people to connect with you?
Sure. My website is www.thesusanito.com. So that's my full website. I'm also on most of the social medias as The Susan Ito. And that's it. There's a contact form on my website. You can contact me through there and I will write back as soon as I'm able.
Awesome. Are you still looking for book tour locations or are you done with that?
No, I'm not actively looking, but if somebody invites me to a thing, I will go to a thing if I'm available. So somehow my calendar keeps filling up.
Yes.
I'm actually going to Virginia in October, and I have a number of appearances in the Bay Area. I'm going to be part of Litquake and Lit Hop in Fresno, and a number of literary and reading events.
Nice. Oh, well, your book is amazing, and everybody should read it if they haven't already, and just share it. And, listeners, just help get Susan's book out into the world even more, because it's so important for us to hear adoptee stories, transracial and interracial, biracial adoption stories. It's so important. Reunion stories. So thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to say as we close that I didn't ask you about?
I don't think so. I think I appreciate anyone who reads the book. I encourage people to write their own stories if they find it helpful. And I'm really honored to be part of the conversation. It's a big conversation, an important one.
Very important. Well, thank you. And congratulations on your wonderful achievements, and keep going. And I think there's a couple more books in you, right?
I'm working on a couple more right now.
Yeah. All right. I'll be first in line. So thank you very much, Susan, for being here and sharing yourself with us today.
Thank you so much.
And listeners, after you go check out Susan's book, make sure and find Unraveling Adoption on the internet at unravelingadoption.com. And we really appreciate your reviews of our books and our podcast. I don't know about you, but I always read other people's reviews before buying things. So if you have a moment to go review Unraveling Adoption podcast, or go review Susan's book, or go review our book, Adoption and Suicidality, those small efforts really, really add up, and they help very much to get the word out to other people. Thank you so much for your support, everyone. Thank you all for listening. Susan and I want you all to stay
safe.